16th, 2020.
Not quite yet, Mr.
Special
Stedman.
Harbor. Oh,
Wait for the
ready
announcement.
to go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. I want to call to order the July 16th, 2020 Special Harbor Commission meeting. Angela, can you please do a roll call?
Commissioner Kramer,
Here.
Commissioner McRae,
Here.
Commissioner Nelson,
Here.
Commissioner Sly,
Here.
Commissioner Sloan,
Here.
Commissioner Spicer, Chair Stedman.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Harbor Commissioners, good to see you. Chair Stedman, no changes to the agenda this evening.
Thank you very much, Director Wiltshire. One comment I want to make, at this time, are there any public inquiries or comments, Angela, that have been submitted?
Chair Stedman, there are currently 23 people logged on, and some of them have raised their hand, but I'm not clear if they have raised their hand for general public comments or if they have raised their hand for a specific item on the agenda. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unraise all their hands and ask that each speaker re-raise their hand if they would like to speak during general public comments. And then also for the people who are not raising their hand, the public comment instructions to indicate that you would like to make a public comment, click the raise or lower your hand icon on the control panel, and then I'll notify you when it's your turn to speak, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Yeah, just for
Please
clarity.
go ahead and raise your hand if you wish
any
to make
member
a
of the
general
public-
public comment.
Correct.
Okay, so we have
public
quite a few
comments.
people who, sorry, we have quite a few people who do want to make a public comment. The first one is Craig Woodman. The second one is Joel Ungar, John Clark, Lori Rafferty, and that's it for general public comment. So
Okay, just a
Craig
reminder, I
Woodman,
want to send
you're
out a
going to have 2
reminder.
minutes. I'm sorry, what was that, Chair Stedman?
I wanted to give a reminder to the general public that at this time, we're taking public comments that are not related to agenda item number 4. So I just want to remind the public of that right now before.
Okay, so it looks like we still have quite a few hands raised for the general public comment. So I'll go ahead and start with the order that I read off. So first we have Craig Woodman. Craig Woodman, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Thank you. I don't know what agenda item 4 is. I wanted to speak against the increase in slip transfer fee. Is that one of the agenda item 4? Well, I don't hear. I'm against the fee increase. I'm against the fee increase because it's already exorbitantly high. I have a 28-foot slip that is worth approximately $28,000. Your slip transfer fee would increase, I mean, even the existing slip transfer fee would be very high, and 40% increase if somebody wanted to buy my boat and slip. And I don't think there's any rationale that relates the slip transfer fee proportion to the actual administrative burden on the city to process those transfer fees. I understand the past history of why there is a slip transfer fee, but it seems onerous right now and will just drive down the interest in purchasing used boats like mine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. But I asked him
Next, we have John Clark. John Clark, you have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
I asked him if it's agenda 4, nobody's sitting.
Yes, Mr. Clark, if you're listening, agenda item number 4 is we're going to address the Waterfront Department slip assignment policy. So if anybody in the public has comments relating to that, it might be more appropriate to wait until we.
It was slip transfer.
They didn't want to talk about that now.
This didn't tell me, this is what I was going.
I kept trying
what
to
the
tell you.
I
not
couldn't
to
hear it.
talk.
Well, what was I supposed to do?
Just say,
Mute myself?
no, just say, I will wait. I don't want to, they said it was for general comments.
Okay, I think your mic's still on. Why don't we move on?
Go ahead, Angela.
Okay, so the next person that we have is Debbie Koch. Debbie Koch, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. Debbie Koch, it looks like you're self-muted, but
We didn't want to speak. We were just watching. Sorry.
okay, I'm going to lower your hand. Thank you. The next speaker is Joel Unger. Joel Unger, you have 2 minutes to speak. I'm going to unmute you. You may begin. Joel Unger, it looks like you're self-muted. Did you wish to speak at this time?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, I'm on a camping trip and I have limited cell phone coverage, so I'm going to try and squeeze this in. I think the idea of the slip transfer fee going up is outrageous. And one of the analogies I'd like to raise is with mobile homes. I don't own one at the present, but I recognize that if you want to buy a mobile home in Santa Barbara, you pay a great deal for a space, a great deal more than the mobile home is worth. And I think that situation is a little bit analogous to a boat slip. If someone wants to buy a boat and keep it in Santa Barbara, they have to worry about a boat slip. And most of us have paid a great deal of money to get those slips, just like people who buy mobile homes in Santa Barbara. Now, the law may not apply equally to mobile homes as that does to boat slips, but if the city somehow or other found a way to tax or to raise the price of the transfer of a mobile home, people would be outraged. People in the harbor with boats have allowed this to go on, as the city has, for a long time, so that people are paying large sums of money. But adding to that cost, even maintaining the one that is there now, is just creating more and more of a problem for the transfer of boats. And yeah, I'm about to consider moving my boat to San Francisco or San Diego to sell it. Because if anyone who wants a boat in Santa Barbara has to pay this slip fee and slip transfer fee. And it adds enormously to the burden of people selling boats. I think the city has created a bit of a
Okay, Angela, I guess we're ready for the
Okay.
next public comment.
We are. I also want to remind everyone that this general public comment is for items that are not on the agenda. So if you have any comments relating to items that are the slip transfer fee, I'm going to ask that you lower your hand, or I can also lower everyone's hand and have everyone raise their hand if you have a general public comment, not something on the agenda. So I'm going to actually do that now. If you still wish to make a comment that is not regarding something not on the agenda, please re-raise your hand. Thank you.
Angela, I think some people may not have a computer where they can see the agenda. So maybe it might be worthwhile to review the agenda so that we don't talk about things that aren't on the agenda if people can't see it, because that other gentleman was camping on a cell phone. And so he obviously couldn't see the agenda. So it might be worthwhile just to quickly read through the agenda.
Okay. So the first item on the agenda is we have approval of the minutes. The second item is the director's report. The third item is harbor operations report. Fourth item is the Waterfront Department slip assignment policy. And the fifth item is the election of chairperson, vice chairperson, and commission and committee assignments. So everything that is not regarding any of those, would be the time to speak about it during public comment. So I don't show any hands raised at the moment. I don't believe that we have any public speakers for general public comment. I think the rest are for item number 4.
Okay. Thank you much, Commissioner Sloan and Angela. Let's move on to the consent calendar. Could you read item number 1, Angela?
Of course. Item number 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the special meeting of June 18th, 2020.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Yeah, so moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Let's take a roll call vote. Let's take a roll call vote, Angela.
Okay, let's see. Commissioner Kramer,
Yes.
Commissioner McCray,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Sly,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Sloan,
Yes.
Commissioner Spicer,
Aye.
Chair Stedman.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously.
Okay, very well. Now moving on to item number 2, the department update, director's report.
Yeah, good evening, Harbor Commissioners and members of the public. I hope all are doing well and staying healthy out there with everything going on. So my hope is to keep this front part of the agenda fairly quick and leave a fair amount of time for item number 4 and a good discussion on slip assignment policy. So my director's report this month should be brief. Next slide, please. My first item, as it's been for the past few months, has been a brief coronavirus update, mainly how it pertains to the waterfront. So in short, we are still very much in this thing, and it seems to be trending a little bit in the wrong direction. So as you all probably well know, Santa Barbara County has been reporting an increase in COVID cases over the past few weeks. So this has prompted some additional county implemented restrictions that have directly affected our waterfront tenants. So the latest round of restrictions have kind of rolled back a little bit to where we were about a month ago with closure of indoor dining, bars, breweries, wineries, and some museums. So although these impacts to our tenants are huge, it's been motivating to see it down here at the waterfront. Most of our tenants are finding ways to continue operations, and some of them are pretty inventive. So they've kind of reformed practices and are opening up some outdoor dining spaces and implementing new distancing guidelines and additional cleaning and sanitizing. And the waterfront staff have worked well with the restaurant tenants who've been interested to set up extended outdoor dining. I know there's some on Stearns Wharf and some dining options in the public right away. So I encourage all of you and the public watching to spread the word on visiting Stearns Wharf and our Harbor Business District, and come down here and use our facilities in a safe and socially distant way. But there are still businesses open and doing business. Next slide. Regarding the 4th of July weekend, I want to commend waterfront staff first and foremost, and Harbor Patrol and Parks Rangers and the lifeguards for acting so quickly and effectively on short order to really implement and enforce the closure of our beaches and parking lots over the 4th of July weekend. We'll hear a little more about this in the harbor operations update, but I really wanted to convey that in hindsight, I truly believe it was the right decision. There was a lot of pressure from outside communities with LA County and Ventura County closing their beaches. So it all kind of came together in the late innings, and we were able to close our beaches and parking lots. And I think it did a lot for the operations down here. It kind of kept things safe and sane. But again, we'll talk more about this in the harbor operations report. So I'll leave 4th of July for then. Additionally, with respect to coronavirus, we've unfortunately had to postpone and cancel a number of our events: 4th of July fireworks, the nautical swap, harbor clean sweep, all these great things that, being new, I haven't even gotten a chance to experience since I've been here. So it's kind of a bummer to see these great events get postponed, but again, and it's the right thing to do. And so our next major event on our calendar is the Harbor and Seafood Festival. So we haven't made a final decision on this, but the way things are going, it's really not looking like an ideal time to have an event of this magnitude. Harbor and Seafood Festival brings 10 to 15,000 people, as you well know, and it's in very, very close quarters. So October seems like a long way away, but July seemed like a long way away back in February and March when we were starting all this. So we have a lot more information now, and we're kind of hoping to make a final decision on the Harbor and Seafood Festival by August 1st. So more to come on that. And then with respect to our waterfront operations, so our counter and waterfront admin offices are still closed to the public, but we are successfully conducting business virtually by email, phone, and appointments. So the usual summer workload is continuing on with parking permits and slip fees and visitor slips and all that sort of marina management related stuff. So there's a lot of information on our website. If you need to continue to do business with the waterfront, we are available, and we intend to do so. Looking forward to the time when it's safe enough to open and conduct business publicly. One other point is the boat launch remains open. This has been great in my mind. I'm really happy with the folks who are using it responsibly and can get out on the water. And we're hoping that can continue, because it's a great resource. Next slide, please, Angela. Last on my list is the status of our harbor operations manager recruitment. So as mentioned last month at the meeting, we're in the middle of recruiting for a new harbor operations manager. This position has been vacant for almost a year now with the retirement of Mick Cronman. So the application deadline closed on July 15th, and we're in the process of reviewing applications and scheduling interviews. Realistically, if all goes well, we're hoping to fill this position by September. Next slide, Angela. And just to wrap up with regards to upcoming meetings, so a reminder that our August Harbor Commission meeting has been canceled, a little bit of a summer break, and we'll convene again on September 17th. The items that are slated for discussion on the September meeting is our sea level rise adaptation update. If you remember, we were supposed to do this, I believe, a month or two ago, and it's been kind of put on hold. But September, we'll be getting some information on sea level rise. and along with a number of standard lease renewals will come back to the commission in September. So that brings me to the end of my report. Does the Harbor Commission have any questions on anything that I've gone over? Okay, hearing nothing, I'd like to pass it over to Harbor Patrol Officer Jessica Gray. She's
I have a
covering
question.
Oh, yep.
I'm sorry. I have a question. What's the status of the facilities manager situation?
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Yes, we're kind of jumping the gun. I have an item at the end of this, but Carl Triberg has announced his retirement, and we're going to begin recruiting for that position in the near future as well. So Carl's official final day is tomorrow, and so that was a surprise to us all. But we will be talking about that a little bit at the end in staff communications. But we are looking to recruit for his position soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, so hearing no more questions, I'm going to pass it over to Harbor Patrol Officer Jessica Gray. She's filling in for Eric Engbretson and is going to give the harbor operations update. Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gray. Yeah, I'm filling in for Eric tonight, and I'm reading the harbor operations report that he prepared. And I know Mike touched on this a little bit, but the waterfront experienced a calm 4th of July weekend. Due to increased infections of COVID-19, surrounding coastal communities began closing beaches and parking lots in further attempts to reduce the spread of the virus. And with the surrounding beach closures, it became evident that the city of Santa Barbara's waterfront was soon going to become a major travel destination for the 4th of July weekend. So in line with state parks and Santa Barbara County beach closures, city leaders reluctantly closed waterfront parking lots as well as beaches within the city limits. So this decision was not taken lightly, but in the interest of public safety, staff felt strongly the closures were in order. So the 4th of July weekend was very quiet within the waterfront. And although our visitor slips were at full capacity, our guests were mindful and practiced social distancing. Boating traffic was relatively light in comparison to past 4th of July events. Beach closure enforcement was handled with a very spirit of the law approach. And beach goers were very cooperative throughout the weekend. The launch ramp and the harbor main parking lots filled quickly on the 4th of July, but with really relatively few complaints. So Harbor Patrol, we participated in Operation Dry Water, which puts a heightened awareness on boating under the influence. Boating enforcement agencies throughout the country take a proactive focus on education and enforcement of boating under the influence during popular summer holiday events. So these are unprecedented times. We certainly appreciate the strong support and cooperation we receive from our community. And that's all I have from the harbor operations tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Officer Gray. Very thorough. Okay, so now we're going to move on to new business. Item number 4. Angela, can you read the recommendation, please?
Yes, of course. Item number 4, Waterfront Department Slip Assignment Policy, recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from staff on the Waterfront Department Slip Assignment Policy and, as appropriate, provide direction to staff.
Thank you very much. So we're going to receive Director Wiltshire's presentation now, and then afterwards we'll take public comment.
All right, well, back to me. Thank you, Chair Stedman and commissioners. So yeah, moving on to the meat of this meeting. Tonight I'll be giving a presentation on the Waterfront Department Slip Assignment Policy with a specific focus on slip permit transfer fees. So my aim here is a comprehensive and candid and clear outline of our slip assignment policy. I anticipate my presentation will take about 30 minutes, so certainly feel free to jump in and stop me anytime if you have any questions throughout. Once I'm complete with my presentation, as Chair Stedman mentioned, that'd be a great time for public comment or input, as well as any Harbor Commission discussion on the item. So next slide, Angela. Here's an outline of the presentation I'll aim to cover. So I want to go over a little background on Tidelands grant, which governs the use of the waterfront lands. And I'll talk about what a slip assignment or slip transfer is and how it's defined. Then I'll get into some details on slip assignment policy and how it came about. And additionally, I'll speak about the private market value of slips and its relation to slip permit transfer fees. And then I'd like to address some of the public concerns that have come up with slip assignments. And I'll discuss some options for changes and resulting impacts of those changes. And finally, I'll turn it back over to the Harbor Commission to receive public comment and discuss the item and make any appropriate recommendations. Next slide, please, Angela. A little background, not directly related to slip transfer assignments, but I thought it was pertinent. I thought it'd be useful and important to give a little brief history on the Tidelands grant and how the waterfront came to be and some of the governing guidelines on how it needs to be operated. So in 1925, essentially all of the Tidelands, submerged lands fronting the city of Santa Barbara, were granted to the city from the state of California. So this kind of, in today's spatial awareness, this roughly translates to the land south of Cabrillo Boulevard fronting the city of Santa Barbara. So at this time in 1925, there was no breakwater. So in 1927 is when the city started construction on the permanent breakwater. So these lands and operations are held within trust by the city for public use. And there are a lot of specific requirements on how this land is used, and generally includes things like marina related uses such as harbors, wharves, businesses serving marine related functions, restaurants, vessel brokers, all the kind of things you see that are present today are kind of governed and guided by the Tidelands Grant Trust. So it does require that the harbor always remain a public harbor, meaning that it cannot be privately owned or operated, must be open to the public. And it requires the city to maintain a separate Tidelands Trust Fund or a waterfront fund, separate from that of the city general fund, where all revenues generated within the Tidelands Trust land are spent and utilized within the Tidelands Trust land. So that essentially, waterfront funds need to remain within the waterfront to maintain and operate the waterfront. Next slide, please. All right, so I included this one just out of interest and to break up the monotony of hearing me speak and address all these wordy slides, but I just thought this was a really neat photo. I've got it up in my office and it really shows the massive transformation that's occurred in the last century. So I believe this was in 1934 and you can see the breakwater, but even most of the land that the current harbor district resides on is not really there. And so it's kind of amazing to see what has happened in the last less than 100 years. All right, next slide. Before I move on to slip assignments, is there any questions from the Harbor Commission on Tidelands Trust or that background that I just gave? All right, hearing nothing, I'll move on. So a little background on what a slip assignment or transfer is. So in general, a slip transfer occurs when a slip permittee sells their interest in a vessel and requests the new owner be assigned their slip permit. Although the entire slip permit assignment policy is outlined in Unicode section 17.20.005, I'd like to highlight a few of the key points. So one key point is that slip permits are month-to-month license agreement. There's no ownership of the property. This is city and waterfront property that is licensed to a slip permittee. A spouse can be added to a slip permit for $50 without requiring a slip permit transfer fee. But to add children or any other relatives or individuals to the slip permit requires payment of the slip transfer fee. And proof of vessel ownership and operability are required to obtain and maintain a slip permit. So that list of points is by no means conclusive, but those are kind of some of the highlights that tend to come up with the slip assignment policy. Next slide, please. All right, so getting into the history of the slip assignment policy. So being relatively new to the waterfront myself, I dug pretty deep into the history of slip assignment policy and kind of everything that went into shaping the policy over the decades. And there was a lot, to say the least. So there's been significant review over many years from multiple entities, including Harbor Commission, City Council, Grand Jury, and the State Lands Commission. All entities have evaluated and made recommendations to the slip assignment policy that have kind of shaped its structure and where it is to date. And so running through some of these major waypoints throughout the years, in 1975 is when council first adopted the first slip assignment policy to help manage the transfer of slip permits between permittees. And in 1982, the grand jury and State Lands Commission reviewed a number of harbor related items, mainly focused on accounting and general uses of and proper uses of trust land, but it included analysis of slip permit transfers and the assignment policy. The State Lands Commission specifically identified concerns with private financial gain off of public asset with no monetary benefit to the trust-owned property, and recommended the imposition of a substantial slip permit transfer fee that is kind of relative to the market value of the slip permit. So in 1982, this is what kind of spurred some action. And in 1982, the Harbor Commission and City Council approved and adopted the first slip permit transfer fee, which was $10 per foot, with the intention of it increasing over time to kind of better match private market value of slip permits being exchanged. Next slide, please. All right, so furthermore, in the history between 1982 and 1987, the slip permit transfer fee was raised from $10 per foot to $50 per foot, under recommendations to continue to increase the slip transfer fees over time, as opposed to a one-time adjustment to align with market values. So they're trying to kind of feather in the slip permit transfer fees. In 1990, the grand jury again reviewed harbor operations and made recommendations to slip permit transfer policy, as a number of loopholes and abuses were identified to get around the current assignment policy. So two of the main takeaways of the 1990 grand jury review was that there should be no adding of partners to slips without a slip permit transfer fee. And they recommended that there should be strict enforcement on the policy to ensure that there's an even playing field and that people weren't subverting the policy in any way. Moving forward, in 2001, the grand jury again reviewed the harbor operations and reported that the harbor was overall well run. This was generally an improvement from past reports, as they indicated, the previous reports indicated some pretty rough conditions with maintenance and overall operation. The 2001 report did identify one main concern with the lack of fairness with existing slip permit transfer system, along with the situation of conveying value of a public resource to private individuals. So the main tenor of the report recommended moving towards a waitlist system to ensure equal access to all and eliminate the buying and selling of access to slips altogether. Most recently, in 2016, grand jury again reviewed the overall waterfront operations and found they are operating within state and local regulations. And this 2016 report also discussed the taxation of slip permits, identifying the reasoning for the county assessment tax being that the city is providing exclusive access to a publicly owned asset, which is kind of the reasoning behind the possessory interest tax at a very high level. Next slide, please. So with that really brief summary of the history, that brings us to the current day. So I wanted to take a pause and see if there was any questions or comments from the Harbor Commission on the history of the slip transfer policy and how we've gotten here today. All right, hearing nothing, I'll move on. So yeah, I hope that history kind of painted a picture for the public and the Harbor Commission of how it got here and everything that has gone in for all the iterations over the decades to forming the current slip assignment policy. So as with any policy, sometimes it's created and updated as a result of a small portion of users finding loopholes or finding ways around a policy. In general, it's pretty clear upon reviewing the history that today's current policy is in place to address essentially the same concerns as originally intended. So I'd be the first to agree that it's not a perfect system, and it's certainly quite complex. But over the years, it's been reviewed numerous times and deemed the best option for the unique situation in Santa Barbara. And I did want to address the fact that there has been increased public interest in the slip permit transfer fee and process in the past 1 to 2 months. And I'll try and address these concerns in the coming slides directly. Next slide. All right, so I'll give you a little bit of time to make sense of this graph, but this slide summarizes our effort to keep tabs on estimated market values for slips. So as with any real estate or market valuation, it's not an exact science, but we work with brokers and the county to try to get an idea of the private to private market value of slips when they transfer. So what you're looking at here is along the vertical axis is the estimated market value in dollars, and along the horizontal axis is time ranging from 2009 to 2018. So each colored bar in the year represents a different slip size. So as you can see, the larger slips are ranging upwards of $300,000+ for market value, and the smaller slips sell for much less, $5,000 to $30,000 range. Should be noted that this data doesn't contain some of the end tie slips and side tie slips that have sold for much more than $300,000 and can go for upwards of $750,000 to $1 million. But those are smaller. There's smaller numbers of those slips, and so this is kind of focusing on the core slips within the harbor. And as with real estate, market pricing seems to ebb and flow. So this data does show a slight decline in market value of slips over the last 5 years or so. Any questions from the commission on this estimate average market value of slips?
Yes, I have a question. Are these valuations including the value of the slip transfer fee, or is a slip transfer fee added to these values that are listed here on the table or shown in the graph?
Thank you. That's a great question. So no, these are strictly the private to private market valuations of the slip. These do not include the slip permit transfer fee.
And Mike, can you just give a quick rundown of kind of how many of these are in each category? Maybe do under 30, 30 to 50, and 50 and above, or some whatever makes sense, and just so people get an idea of the magnitude of the number of these slips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Commissioner Sloan, that's a great question as well. I have a slide in 2 slides that kind of hammers that out really, really well.
Okay.
I break it down. So if you don't mind, we could wait till that one, and if it's not addressed then we could touch back on it. But I think I've got the answer for you in a couple slides.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, perfect. Next slide. All right, so similar graph, but this graph kind of shows the relationship between slip permit transfer fees and market values. So on the vertical axis is slip permit transfer fee expressed as a percentage of the estimated market value. So, and on the x-axis again is time ranging from 2009 to 2018. So as you can see, for smaller slips, 20 and 30 foot, the slip permit transfer fee represents 30 or 40% of the market value. But for larger slips, 45 to 60 plus, the slip for permit transfer fee represents a much smaller portion. So on the range of kind of 8 to 12% of the private market value. So really, this is a good topic for consideration. So it's been clear that one of the objectives of the slip transfer fee was to ensure a fair return to the trust granted land, or the waterfront, the resource that the waterfront owns, based on the value of the asset at hand. So there could be different ways to achieve that. And so one option is aiming for the slip transfer fee to make up a set percentage of market value. So for example, the slip permit transfer fee should represent 25% of the market value. So if this were the objective, the smaller slips would have met and exceeded this target, where the larger slips would need to be increased fairly substantially to meet that share. So this is kind of the line of thinking with freezing the smaller slip permit transfer fees, as they are already more proportional and commensurate to their market value. So for example, the trust-owned asset is sharing proportionately in the value of the asset at hand, but the larger slips may still be increased so that their fair share of the market value to the trust-owned asset is recognized. Next slide, please.
Hey, Mike, before you move on, Do you know off the top of your head when we froze the 30 foot, and then I think we froze the 25 foot first, and then we froze the 30 foot? And
Yeah.
if not, maybe Bill remembers.
Angela, do you mind skipping ahead once, or yeah, next slide? Let me see.
Oh, if it's coming up, I hate to, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think that specific question is, and I might have to get back to you exactly on those years, and I probably should have included when we did exactly freeze those. I do have Jeanette Przinski available. She might be able to weigh in on when we froze the slips 30 feet and below, but if not, I can get back to you on that one.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay. I'll speak to this next slide. So this slide aims to provide a breakdown of the number of slip transfers by year. And so the top table shows the number of transfers and number of waitlist transfers by year from 2008 through 2019. So as you can see, the number of slips provided from the waitlist each year is very small. Also, this table shows that in general, the number of annual slip transfers has been increasing since 2008. Not dramatically, but a clear increase in slip transfers since 2008. So to me, this indicates that there's less stagnation instead of more stagnation, and there's more movement of slips in the past 3, 4, 5 years than there were a decade ago. The lower table simply shows a breakdown of slips within the harbor by size. So roughly 53% of the slips are 35 feet or less. And you can see the categories where the bulk of the slips are. So we have large numbers of 35 and 30 and 28 foot slips, and it kind of tails off on the smaller end and on the larger end. Next slide, please. So Commissioner Sloan, I think this table gets to what you were getting at. So this gives a little more granularity on the annual slip transfers, breaking them out by slip size. And so this is really intended to be informational and shows that slip transfers kind of occur, or at least what I take from it is slip transfers kind of occur roughly proportional to the slip size inventory. So as you can see, year by year, there's more 35 foot and 28 foot and 30 foot transfers, possibly because we just have more of those slips. So there's more to transfer. And on the tail ends, the smaller slips and the larger slips don't transfer as frequently on a nominal basis, but we ultimately have less of those slips. Does that help answer your question at all, Commissioner Sloan?
Yeah, where I was going with it was, back on that slide when we talk about the percentage of value of the transfer fee versus the slip value. At certain points in our history, we've frozen the slip transfer fees increase for the 25 foot slip and then the 30 foot slip later on. And I was just wondering about that time frame back, comparing that graph. And that graph would have to be blown up a little bit more to actually see if there was any change, because there just isn't the granularity in that graph. But to see if there was any influence in that. So, or in this also addresses it, to see if maybe there are more slip transfers in the 30 and under since we froze the slip transfer fee increase, or froze the slip transfer fee.
Yeah, right. No, that's a good point. I mean, you can kind of scan this table quickly, and it appears that, if anything, it may appear that there are more transfers in the 25 foot and 30 and under category in the last 3 or 4 years as opposed to a decade ago.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, Bill, do you remember when we did that?
I don't recall the year. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't either. Okay, thanks. I think the point's made anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can get that information out to you pretty quickly. We have that history. I just don't have it off the top of my head when we were, Jeanette.
There's Jeanette.
Hi, Chair Stedman, Commissioners. This is Jeanette Przinski. I'm the Administrative Supervisor here. I have this information for you. The 20s were frozen in 2007. The 25s were frozen in 2013. The 28s and 30s were frozen in 2015.
Excellent.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Jan. Much appreciated.
Mike, how do you decide fair market private value? How do you do that?
Commissioner Nelson, if I'm understanding your question, how do we don't necessarily decide the private market value. I believe that's determined by the market. So we try and keep tabs on that private market value. That is the price that a buyer and a seller negotiate between themselves for the slip. And
do you incorporate that in your fee schedule? How do you use that information that you keep tabs on?
Yeah, and so that information has led to the freezing of slips 30 feet and below. So we're trying to basically share in the value of the asset that is the waterfront and the slips. And so as that increases, as the proportion of the slip transfer fee to the market value increases, we can freeze the slip. So the general intent is to freeze all of the slip transfer fees at some point when it's deemed fair between the value that the waterfront receives and the value of the slip for all slip sizes. And so that sort of information has led to the freezing of slips 30 feet and below to date. Did that answer your question, or was I way off?
I apologize. I had jaw surgery over the weekend and I'm difficult to understand. It's just, I'm trying to figure out when we make a decision to raise the fees, how do we get there and how do we communicate that decision? And you answered that question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Nelson. Well, I can definitely understand you clearly. So sorry to hear about the jaw surgery over the weekend. All right, well, if we're good with this, I'll move on to the next slide. All right, so now I'd like to take a little bit of time and address some of the specific public concerns that have come both to me directly and to the waterfront over the past month or so. And I tried to kind of consolidate them into a list of what sort of boiled to the top as the most common and recurring concern. So first off, one of the main concerns came up is that the slip permit transfer is just generally too high. It's exorbitant. And so although the fee is large as shown, the aim is to make it commensurate with the value of the asset in question. And so the Harbor Commission can discuss that, and there's definitely room to figure that out, but I agree. Quite often the lion's share of transferring a slip permit is the private to private cost, not necessarily the slip permit transfer fee. So shown that we've kind of shown that this fee ranges between 5% and 35% of the market value of the slip transaction. So again, it's not the lion's share of acquiring a slip. And we've also shown that the slip transfer transactions have been increasing over time. So this could be an indicator that although the fee may limit demand, it's not stifling slip transfers. Moving on, so another point of concern is that the fees are disproportionate to the administrative work provided. And so I just wanted to clarify that's not the intent here. So the slip permit transfer fee is not a kind of fee for service. It's not based on the administrative work provided, but it's really established to be proportionate to the market value of the city asset that is being utilized. And so the city and waterfront, and really any municipality, is allowed to and kind of obligated to ensure market return on our assets, and it's warranted in charging what the market will bear for the use of its property. If we didn't charge what the market would bear and didn't charge fair market rates, it would be kind of doing a disservice to the waterfront fund in the way that we would be not receiving the revenues that were due to us. So there was also concern with the inability to add children or pass slip permits on generationally. And so as a father of two, I can sympathize with passing things such as this forward to children, but I also sympathize with the fact that it's public property, and I can see the rationale behind not being able to tie up that asset for individuals' exclusive use generation after generation. So inheriting or generationally passing on of slips would potentially violate the city charter and the Tidelands Trust, which limits encumbrances and leases on waterfront owned land to 50 years. And so additionally, passing slip permits on generationally would inevitably limit the supply further and favor those who are simply lucky enough to originally obtain a slip in the first place, which kind of creates more of a fairness issue and would limit slip access to the public resource to the friends and family of people who originally acquired them. And it would also limit the supply of slips, putting upward pressure on market pricing and therefore the valuation of the smaller pool of slips that were available. Any major questions before I move on those points? I know these are big topics.
Hey, Mike, so on that inheritance, if I were to acquire the rights to a slip, the permit for a slip, I could add my children as partners on that slip, couldn't I?
Commissioner Sloan, you could add your partners or children, but you would be required to pay the slip permit transfer fee.
No, well, when you first acquire it, let's say I was just acquiring the slip permit, I would have to pay the fee anyway. But at that time, I could add, I believe it's my adult children. I think they have to be 18 or over to be a partner. Is that correct?
At the time? Again, so I'm going to turn to Jeanette on this one if she has an answer for if you can add children at the time of a slip permit.
Hi, Chair Stedman, commissioners. Yes, in fact, it's fairly common for me to take in a slip permit transfer where it's one person plus their adult child. And then later, at least 1 month or maybe longer, add the parent's spouse for the $50 spousal transfer. So that is actually very common for people to do that.
So my point is that there is a way to accomplish that when you first acquire the slip. Now, if your children are not adults at the time you acquire the slip, you would have to pay a transfer fee later on.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, you do have to be 18 in order to enter into a legal contract with us.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. That's the way I thought it was, but I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks again, Jeanette. Good clarification. Any additional questions on inheritance or any of these couple topics? I have a couple more on the next slide, a couple more public concern points, and so I can move on unless we have questions on these specific points. Okay, so one of the overarching concerns is with the county possessory interest tax on slips. And so I'd firstly like to just clarify that this is a tax that's solely assessed, calculated, and collected by the county tax assessor. So the Waterfront Department has no involvement and receives no benefit from this tax. I guess that was my legal disclaimer, but I'm not a lawyer, but I'll do my best to outline what I do know about this tax. So fundamentally, possessory interest tax is levied due to an individual having exclusive access to a public resource. It's really common practice throughout California, and it exists in a number of different applications. So ranging from private entities leasing public buildings to airplane tie downs at public airports, and even to things like cattle grazing on public lands. And so there's a tax assessed based on the use of a public land. And that's no different than here at the harbor. A lot of the concerns were with regards to how it is calculated. So that's again a county tax assessor function, but it seems like one of the main concerns is with the inclusion of the slip permit transfer fee and the overall valuation of the taxable slip permit value. One key point to clarify is that the inclusion of the slip permit transfer fee in the valuation is only included in those slips that have been appraised kind of since 2017. So this is something new that the county has included. So for the majority of slip holders, this item is not included in the tax valuation as tax is assessed on your purchase value or the annual Prop 13 limit of a 2% tax increase per year. And this slip permit transfer fee would not be added on top of that. So the county takes the lesser of the market value or the Prop 13 value and taxes on that. So this nuance may not apply to the majority of slip holders, but it is the way that the county is assessing taxes going forward. And any time that there is a appraisal required on your slip value, which comes about by a number of reasons, one of them being a transfer, this would be valued into the fair market price of the slip. And in summary, I think what the county is looking to establish is the full and fair market value of a slip by including all the costs that a buyer would willingly pay to acquire the slip. So this kind of realistically represents the market value or what a buyer would willingly pay. And when a buyer purchases a slip, they willingly pay the private to private purchase price as well as the slip permit transfer fee. And so the county rolls that in as part of the market value to assess taxes on going forward. And additionally, I did want to bring the attention, I do know there was a recent appeal against this matter, which was denied by the County Assessment Appeals Board on June 1st of 2020. I don't have a huge amount of background, but there were minutes available on the County Assessment Appeals Board website for this issue. And not being our wheelhouse at the waterfront, I urge anyone who has further interest in the county possessory interest tax to contact the county tax assessor's office, because they can get more into the weeds on this than we can. It's really not anything that we have any involvement in or any benefit from. So that's it. Yeah, I urge you to contact the county tax assessor's office if you have any questions on that. Any questions from the Harbor Commission on the possessory interest tax? All right, hearing none, I'll move on to the final concern that came out from the public, and that was just the waterfront budget in general. There were a lot of concerns or some concerns about the waterfront budget and where these slip permit transfer revenues are going. So the slip permit transfer fee revenue is certainly a part of the waterfront overall budget. It makes up roughly 6 to 8% of our total waterfront budget. So, and just as a reminder, the waterfront is an enterprise fund, which means we rely solely on waterfront related revenues to cover expenditures. We don't receive any taxpayer dollars. We don't receive any outside funds from the general fund. So we purely fund the operation and maintenance of the harbor and Stearns Wharf and the Harbor Business District from revenues that are generated within the waterfront. The slip permit transfer fees make up a portion of that. And so where they go is they go into our budget to cover our operating expenses and capital expenditures to maintain the harbor going forward. We are a public harbor and a public marina, so there's no shareholders or anything like that. All of our budget is balanced yearly, and is a very public process that goes through Harbor Commission and Harbor Commission Budget Subcommittee, City Council annually, and so this budget is kind of reviewed and balanced on an annual basis. So those seem to capture the bulk of the public concerns that were received over the past month or two. Does Harbor Commission have any questions on any of these items? I think I only have one or maybe two more slides. All right, I'll get through it. Next slide, Angela.
Mike, before you move on, I'm just curious about the fact that people are concerned and upset about this, and part of the problem is the county, and part of the problem is the city. Do we make an effort to work with the city and county with that interface with our clients, our slip holders, or we just say, sorry, we've got nothing to do with the county assessor's office, you're on your own? Or is there a way that, or have we ever sort of been facilitate a conversation between our customers and the county because this is such a big issue for them?
Yeah, Commissioner Nelson, thanks for that question. In short, yes. So I do know that with every slip transfer, we provide all of the kind of basic information on the county possessory interest tax with contact information and who to contact. Since over the last month, I have personally been in contact with the county tax assessor, and they've been really responsive to my concerns. And a number of the folks that have reached out to them, I have seen correspondence where both the city and the county and the waterfront are responding kind of in unison. So I know that I myself and waterfront staff are working with county assessor staff to make sure there's clarity on who stays in what lane. And I don't want to give the perception that I don't want to work with our slip holders when it comes to the county. I just don't want to get too far out of our lane as to what we're supposed to be managing and what we're not. And so I really want the county as the experts on this one to have the opportunity to answer, but by no means will we just push people off to the county. I'm wholeheartedly involved, and I'm happy to be involved in bridging that gap.
The reason I asked that is an individual approached me, and his big issue was being ignored and the county not being responsive to him and him not being able to get to the appeals board. And so it troubles me that they're approaching me as a harbor commissioner about a problem that the county is creating in terms of how it determines the tax assessed value and how they respond to our customers that we allow this to occur. And we can't figure out a way to sit down with the county and say, look, you know, this is a problem for us, and we would love to figure out a way to smooth this out. So the next time you're going to just arbitrarily or decide to include the fair market value of the slip in your assessment, you got to let us know that so we can work together to inform and answer questions that our slip holders might have. More outreach to our customers as opposed to, look what they did. And then we're here today in some respects because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Commissioner Nelson, that's not lost on me. And I mean, what I can do and what the waterfront can do is try and be transparent and get all that information forward. And I have no problem doing that, being kind of the bridge between waterfront and county. But what the waterfront can't do is assist with county policy and procedure and how they conduct meetings and how they choose to respond to the public. I can't entice them to do that. I can't force them to do that. That's really their process. And so to the best of my ability, we'll be forthcoming with any information and in involving the county, and I'll try to involve the waterfront and the county as much as I can. But
Mike
I
and
agree with
Commissioner Nelson, just for the record, last year, 4 staff members did meet with the county on these topics. And I believe Jeanette was one of them, and Mr. Cromman and a couple others. So that is an ongoing relationship that, you know, we'll let Mike take it from there.
Commissioner Spicer, thank you. I'm showing my newness. I'm trying to get up to speed by reading everything I can. But yeah, that's a good reminder. I was aware that there was a staff meeting between the county and city to talk about this exact topic.
Thank you. I'm very glad to hear that we were proactive in trying to address big issues that our slip holders are raising. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe that's what led to us providing information with every slip transfer to kind of allay those concerns as to how to get a hold of the county. What is the county possessory interest tax to sort of delineate those lanes between the county possessory interest tax and the slip permit transfer fee. So thank you. All right, so moving on to some potential hypotheticals. So this is my final slide, and it really just shows some hypothetical options for change and outlines some of the impacts with those changes. So the first the first potential change or hypothetical change could be removing or reducing the slip transfer fee altogether. So as with anything, this is certainly an option. My take would be this would kind of go against all of the previous recommendations of the Harbor Commission and City Council and Grand Jury and a lot of effort that has gone into this. And it would potentially recreate some of the past concerns with the system that allows private gain with no monetary benefit to the waterfront, and would additionally, anytime a revenue source is removed, I mean, it's no secret that the slip permit transfer fee is a portion of the waterfront budget. So anytime revenues go away, we need to figure out somewhere to balance the expenditures. And so even in the best of times, adjusting for a 6 to 8% reduction in revenues is really tough. I mean, that's a fairly significant portion. The current climate would make this extremely difficult with the impacts of COVID dramatically affecting the waterfront budget now and for the foreseeable future. So I know waterfront staff and Harbor Commission and Council just combed through our fiscal year 2020 budget line item by line item and making some really tough decisions and reduce the budget by roughly 10%, which is a massive hit to a budget. One of the other options is moving on the option to freeze slip permit transfer fees once they reach an appropriate level. So the relationship between slip permit transfer fees and market values have been kind of shown and discussed in previous slides. A lot of that reasoning drove freezing the slips 30 feet and below. So consequently, larger slips still have a large delta between the fee and the market value. So, and could be raised until they're more reflective or not. And so that freezing the slip transfer fees is an option. And so finally, moving into the option of a wait list or a partial wait list only. So really looking back at all the history, this comes up time and time again. So it's really noted as the most fair option in a number of past reports. It removes private buying and selling of slips and allows for equal access to the resource. But it also comes with some major adverse consequences. So moving to a waitlist system would basically make the acquisition of a boat and a slip together really, really difficult. You just couldn't do that. So that would have huge impacts on not only the brokers, but any private party trying to buy and sell a boat in the harbor, because you just couldn't simultaneously acquire a slip and a boat. It would also put a huge burden on all of the existing slip holders, as it would become really difficult for them to recoup their initial investment if we went to a waitlist only system. It would also require significant enforcement and administration, because if we go to a waitlist only system, we would have to ensure that it didn't revert back to people subverting the waitlist or doing private to private sales or off the book dealings to kind of subvert that waitlist. And this would also remove a portion of the waterfront's budgeted revenues, which would have to be made up elsewhere to balance expenditures. So I know that was a lot, but my aim was to be as transparent and thorough and candid as possible. Let me know if Harbor Commission, you have any questions on this, but on the next slide, I'll put up our staff recommendation and turn it over to the Harbor Commission and for discussion and any public comment.
Hey, Mike, on that, freezing the slip permit transfer fee, would there be a way just to assess the slip transfer fee as a percentage of the price of the permit?
Commissioner Stone, so as a price of the market value?
Yeah, so if you bought a slip from me for some price, you would pay a percentage of that, a fixed percentage of that to the waterfront as a transfer fee, rather than a set dollar value, a percentage of the slip permit transfer cost.
Yeah, Commissioner Sloan, and the way I understand it is that was kind of what it was trying to get to, but the waterfront is not typically involved in the private to private sale. So we'd have to somehow be a part of that sale and acquire that information on sales value, which is kind of a squirrely number to get at best. And so it's kind of the brokers and the county who are involved in that exact number. So it would be a change may be difficult, maybe not, to kind of loop us in and tie a fixed percentage to the sale.
Yeah, having been through that a number of times myself, we'd have to change how it's done because that would be easily subverted. You know, I could pay you a certain amount on record and pay you some amount, you know, off the book, so to speak. You know, there are ways to subvert that. And so we'd have to really take a hard look at formalizing that. And so it may or may not be worthwhile.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's kind of like when somebody buys a used car and they get to fill out what purchase price they did and they hand it to the DMV. And so it's, yeah, I mean, there's ways and it's definitely something that can be looked into.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Just a thought. Go ahead, please.
Well, no, I mean, if there's no further questions, that's all I had. I'll put the recommendations up on the screen. Angela, I think it's the next slide. And then just kind of close in summary that saying what would help the waterfront here is just some direction on, and your guys' discussion on if you require any further analysis on the slip assignment policy, if further analysis is warranted, if the slip assignment policy is adequate as it stands. You can certainly make a motion or a recommendation to staff if there's any portion of this that you feel warrants further review, and I can have myself and staff look into it and bring it back. And I turn it over to you now, Chair Stedman.
Thank you very much, Mike. So under consideration here is whether or not the Waterfront Department should conduct further analysis. Is that clear?
Yeah, if you're asking that would help staff as a next step. And so we'll leave this meeting kind of looking for direction from Harbor Commission, and I've kind of laid it all out as it is, the slip assignment policy. And so it would be up to the Harbor Commission to discuss and review. And if all is well, all is well. If there are certain items that you'd like us to look into, we're happy to do that too.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So is there a motion to determine whether further analysis is warranted?
I think we should hear the public comment first, don't you?
Okay. Any other input from the commissioners before we open up to public comment?
Yes, I'm at the point where it looks like there's been no real changes or review of how we establish the fee for the last 30 years. Every 10 years, we sort of say, oh, well, it's not perfect, but it's the best we got. Let's carry on and we will deal case by case with these problems. Councilmember Friedman sent a copy of the 99, what was it called, council agenda report to the individual who's been talking to me, which gave
Mr.
the
Chairman, could I interrupt for just a minute? This is Assistant City Attorney Sarah Connect, and I truly hate to interrupt in the middle of your comment, but I think it would behoove the commission right now to take public comment before you start deliberating on the matter. And Commissioner Nelson's comment was a bit more in line with a deliberation than a question. So if I could just suggest that you go to public comment, hear the public comment, and then kind of go back to discussion and recommendation.
Very well. Thank you, Attorney Connect.
Sure.
Much appreciated. So at this time, Angela, can we go ahead and open up the public comment?
Hi, Chair Stedman. Yes, we can. So we've got a couple speakers that are already starting to raise their hands. So I do want to make a reminder for anyone who does want to make a public comment to please indicate by raising your hand. There should be a little icon on the control panel. So I'm going to read off the first three speakers. We have Bruce Wagner, Christopher Voss, and David Willett. Bruce Wagner, you're going to go first. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Once I unmute you, you may begin. Okay, you're unmuted now.
Okay, thank you. Our biggest concern, we bought a boat to put in the harbor, and saved our money and did all the stuff you do when you get a boat. And boat itself was about $44,000. It was a 1980s sailboat. And when we put it in the slip, our total out of pocket was about $120,000, which was a decent sum to us. Maybe not to some, but it was to us. And about $65,000 of that was acquiring the slip. About $15,000 was paying the transfer fee. So when you add those two together, we had $80,000 in slip and transfer money on a $44,000 boat. And our biggest concern right now, we made an investment to bring a boat in there. And our biggest concern is we would like to have the commission and the harbor department respect that investment that we made. It represents a significant amount of money to us, and we don't want to lose it. And if there's a rule change all of a sudden, and now those slip, selling of the slip goes away, we have no way to recoup that investment, and we're just going to lose everything we put into it. And that's a lot of money to us.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Okay.
Okay, so it appears that Christopher Voss has lowered his hand. I believe he wants to speak for the next item. So the next speaker is David Willett. David Willett, I'm going to unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'd like to echo the first speaker's first public comment. We paid about $70,000 for our slip and about $18,000 for a slip fee, and we view that as an investment. And it's, to the extent that the slip transfer fees are increased, there's a practical limit to what somebody will be willing to pay for a 35-foot slip, which is how long our slip is. And it's not going to, there is a limit. And so to the extent that the transfer fee is continued to be raised, it's basically a money grab out of my pocket at the time that I sell the slip. And so I have a problem with that. And it seems like it's somewhat arbitrary and I forget how it was worded, but to find the right dollar value for the slip transfer. I don't understand how that could be determined if it isn't reflective of the cost of the actual transfer. So the idea of assigning a percentage of the sale of the private sale value to the slip transfer fee kind of makes a little bit more sense. But either way, any increase in slip transfer fee is money out of my pocket ultimately. And so I echo the first comment of, this is an investment that I made, and any motion in the direction of increasing the fees is a detriment to my investment. That's the end of my comment.
Thanks, Mr. Willett.
Okay, so the next speakers that we have lined up, we have Edward Bastian, Elizabeth Rothman, and John Brer. Edward Bastian, you're going to go first. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. Oh, it appears that you're self-muted. If you want to unmute yourself, you may begin.
Can you hear me now?
We'll go ahead and come. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you for doing this. It's really good that you guys are addressing this, and it's all being so much in the open, and we all have an opportunity to weigh in on the final decision. My experience is I live on Marina 4. I don't live there now, but I have a boat on Marina 4A, which I've had for about 12 years. The people that are on the marina are basically middle-class people. They're hardworking people. They're educators. They're healthcare professionals. They're carpenters. They're professors. And they had to work really hard to save money so they could get themselves a boat. It represents for most people a major investment of what they have to put in. So the impression is that we get is that you guys, excuse me, I don't mean that you guys specifically, but are thinking that we're a bunch of rich people with pleasure yachts and we can afford whatever, and that we're going to actually profit on our boat. But that's an oxymoron. If you have a boat, you're not going to profit on the boat. You're going to lose the value on the boat. So if you charge this big transfer fee, it's only exacerbating, and it becomes a kind of a taking, to use that term, of a governmental entity against the rights of a private citizen. You're taking the value out of a vote, which is already decreasing. So I think something like a percentage across the board, yes, it may be challenging to enforce, but something that was really reasonable that respects the average boat owner, just a working Joe, people with their families, so they can afford to be stewards of the harbor and owners of their boats. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bastian.
Okay, so the next speaker is going to be Elizabeth Rothman. Elizabeth, you will have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Hi, this is the first meeting that I've been at. It's very interesting to kind of look behind the scenes. I want to thank you all for meeting and discussing this and, you know, not just taking lateral moves. I kind of want to echo again, a lot of what we've been told. This was a big investment for me. When I entered the harbor, I actually paid 60% of what my investment was in the transfer fee. I paid for the boat and the slip, and then we had the transfer fee. That really kind of put us over the top. I'm on a smaller boat, but I just want to say that it really is not being dispersed evenly. There is no consideration, you know, and it's very hard to understand how these numbers were come by. We just seem to, you know, kind of have things thrown in our laps a lot, and we just have to adjust, but that's not the deal that we kind of made when we came in, and it would be very much greatly appreciated if that could be, you know, respected. I heard someone say that we were willing to pay, you know, certain amounts to get in, and we're sort of begrudgingly paying some of that so that, you know, we can be here in the harbor and, you know, either live here or just enjoy it day by day. But it does, you know, it enters the harbor in a bit of a sour way where you're a little bit resentful because you had to come up with so much more on top of what is already a lot that we're going to be paying a considerable amount of taxes for that we don't own. So I understand that the harbor does need money to function, and that's without a doubt. So I don't know exactly what the solution is, but, you know, while you don't want to lose money, 6 to 8% for your budget, in COVID, we're all out of work. A lot of us are out of work. This is a really unfortunate time for you guys to ask us for these incredible increases. And I just think that, you know, that needs to sort of be entered in this as well, that, you know, our budgets count too. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Roth.
Okay, so next we have John Breyer, and then after that, John Clark and Kirk Greer. John Breyer, it is your turn. You have 2 minutes to speak. I'm going to unmute you and you may begin. It appears that you're self-muted. John Breyer? Okay, we're going to move on to John Clark. John Clark, I'm going to unmute you and you're going to have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name's John Clark, and I own a boat in Marina 3. My family and I love the harbor, Santa Barbara, and we have a great respect and appreciation for all the hard work of the harbor officials, employees, and the harbor patrol. Especially, we appreciate the hard work of the cleaning staff that keeps our harbor areas clean and fresh. Regarding the transfer fee, it's my opinion that the inclusion of the transfer fee in the annual tax calculation is wrong. It's unreasonable. It's unjustified. Sorry, that's my puppy. Property tax is paid on property, not on fees associated with purchase of property. A buyer purchasing a slip should be charged annual property tax fees on no more than the price paid for the slip. All subsequent fees and charges associated with the purchase are not taxable. I own a 28-foot slip, and it cost me roughly $5,000 a year, including all the fees, taxes, utilities, maintenance, and incidentals. Clearly, smaller slips may pay a little less and bigger slips more, But just as an average, let's use this $5,000 figure. When I bought my slip a few years back, it had a boat included, but the cost of the slip was about $30,000. The annual expense of $5,000 represents 16% of the purchase price of $30,000. In 6 years, the cost of my slip, if this annual expense was included, will be double what I paid for it. 6 years later, it will be triple. I would have to sell it for 3 times what I paid just to break even. To be clear, this is how an accountant would treat an investment when the interest of the investor is to make a profit. And this is precisely what is being described here, profiting from the sale of an asset that gained value over time. And this accountant would tell the investor that if they owned an asset for a period of time, that
Okay, so that speaker was out of time. The next speaker is Kirk Greer. Then we have Lori Rafferty and Matthew Hopcroft. Kirk Greer, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Thank you. That was a good presentation, and I want to thank the commission for considering this. I heard something this evening that I didn't expect to hear, and that was that the fee goes as a return on the public asset. And having had boats in America's Cup Harbor in San Diego and in Ventura City Harbor, those places didn't have a fee to generate that return. So that was something I didn't expect to hear, and I don't quite know what to think about that. I'm in a different place maybe than other people here, and I'd like to see us go back to or get to a wait list and not have a private party transfer. I used to sell boats. I was a licensed salesperson. I ran a yacht brokerage, and I was kind of stunned when I moved here. But I also don't want to see the value get lost that I've spent to acquire a permit. And I think we can get there between where we are and where we need to be. And I'm thinking something like a 50-year, 25-year, 50-year transferable but not renewable lease. If you go buy property in Costa Rica, you get a 99-year lease. And what I mean then is if I had a 25-year lease, that has some transferable value to someone else for some period of time. It diminishes over time, and in 25 years, that returns to the city and can go on a wait list. So I think there's something between where we are now and just going straight to a wait list. So I'd like to see, as you guys deliberate this, thinking out of the box on how we might get to a place where we don't need to do what we're doing today. And you know, basically, thank you for thinking about this.
Thanks, Mr. Greer.
Okay, so our next speaker, Lori, has lowered her hand. So I'm going to move on to the speaker after her. It is Matthew Hopcroft. Matthew, I'm going to unmute you and you may begin speaking now.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Director Wilshire for a cogent and informative presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you for that. But one of the things I learned is that the transfer fee is effectively a tax of 35% on a purchase, which to me sounds exorbitant. I can't think of any other purchase that I would pay a 35% tax on. And, you know, if we're simply setting that as a, you know, meant to reflect the value of the asset, 35% really just seems out of bounds for a single purchase. I'm a new resident in Santa Barbara and a new resident in the harbor, and I have only paid 1 year of property tax, and I found the tax assessment extremely confusing, and now I understand why. It's because there is a tax on a tax, and part of the presentation this evening suggested that the problem is that the county has decided to assess the value of the slip using the value that someone paid on the transfer fee as well as the market value of the slip. I wonder if the commission or the staff could investigate a different method of levying the transfer tax that would not be reflected in the county's assessment. I don't know what that is, but I would be interested to hear alternative ways to, even if the value is the same, assess the transfer fee without influencing the market value that the county assessment board sees. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hawcroft.
Okay, so it appears that Lori Rafferty did raise her hand again, so she will be next. After her, it's going to be Robert Cambron and then Scott Weiner. Lori Rafferty, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Okay, hey folks, thanks for all your efforts and listening to us tonight, and to Mike's great presentation. I found it really interesting about the history of how these slip transfer fees came about. It makes me realize the problem we created is kind of a nightmare. I really want to encourage that you all vote to do further analysis of this. We really need to dig into some other options, and I'm a person who likes to offer solutions. I did send you all an email, and I hope you take that seriously. But about Mike's presentation, I think the market reflects this really high net wealth that's moved into our area. And like a gentleman said before, but there's just a lot of little local families trying to get by who've had boats for a long time. My wealth's certainly not going up. And then back to his study, maybe we have more 35-foot slips in the harbor because we just have a lot of those. So maybe that's why he needs to rethink that study about slip transfer thing by slip size. Of course, you're going to have more transfers if you have a certain slip size, if you have more of those slips. So I propose, I have something from a family perspective. I've talked to Oceanside Harbor. They have some really creative ways of what they do it. And I feel like I'm being penalized for having kids later in life, because if I would have got a boat and had a slip, then added my children if they're adults now, I wouldn't be paying any fees. But now I want to add my adult kids. We sell. We're a sailing family, have been since they were baby car seats. So I think you should do what Oceanside does, and you create a one-time family transfer fee. And if you read my email, it talks all about it. I'm not into selling a boat. I'm into selling with my family. And if the family can add them when they're adults, you ought to be able to add them now. So thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Rafferty.
Okay, up next we have Robert Cambron, and then after that we have Scott Weiner, Stephen Young, and then Berth Pruitt. So Robert Cambron, it's your turn. I'm going to unmute yourself, or unmute you, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank Mike and the board for allowing us to chime in on this. I see two major issues here. One is the transfer fee diminishing the value of our slips that we paid a great deal for. And then secondly, I want to agree with the first speaker, Mike, that or Mr. Wagner, that said, you know, we don't see any way possible that you can go back to a wait list only with the investment that we currently have in our slips. There are several questions that I have, and I can follow up these with an email to Mr. Wiltshire or to the office there. One of the questions would be how many adults can be listed as an adult, as a holder of the slip when transferring the fee. The other would be, is the harbor currently running a deficit in their budget? Are they, and then what's the rationale? Well, I understand the rationale that you want to have for smaller slip fees, but is that really fair that you would freeze smaller slip fees and not the larger ones? Aren't they really carrying the burden for the smallers? And I understand you want to get to an equilibrium where there's no increases. You want to freeze them for everyone, but wouldn't that be easier done? And if there's a deficit, wouldn't that be easily balanced if everyone were to pay an increase? So again, it's the, it's the county assessment that is really a concern. And then also the fact that you might take away the ability to transfer.
Thanks, Mr. Cambron.
Okay, so it appears that our next speaker has lowered their hand, so we're going to move on to Stephen Young and then Beth Pruitt. Stephen Young, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
There appears to be two issues associated with the slip transfer. One is the income that is received by the Waterfront Department. And the second is not having the slip owners make a profit on a public land trust. Relative to the first issue, when Mike Willett presented his chart on the number of transfer for basically the past 10 years, I would like to know what was the income that was acquired by those transfers and what is the percentage of the budget? Also, has there actually been someone or some number of people profiteering from selling slips? When I bought my slip, I made a major investment. I had to do that in order to get my boat into Santa Barbara Harbor. I could have invested that money in the stock exchange or some other place and made some money. So as the result of the slips going up in profit, that's only paying for my investment that I would have put that money somewhere else if I had not had to pay for the transfer fee and the cost of getting the slip into buying a slip in order to get my boat into the harbor. So at this point in time, I now believe that the transfer fee is kind of excessive. And basically, if you're trying to prevent people from making a profit, you're not really preventing the people who are selling the slip. You're preventing, like, raising the amount of dollar you're charging. You're preventing people from buying the slips. So the question really comes down is, who is now able to buy slips, transfer their boats into the harbor? It appears that it's only becoming more wealthy and more wealthy over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Young.
Up next, we have Beth Pruitt, and then after that, Christopher Voss and Dennis Bonnick. Beth Pruitt, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. It appears right now that you're self-muted. There you go.
Thank you. First, thank you for the helpful presentation and to the Commission for having this hearing. I think it's been very informative and very helpful. I think there, as many speakers have pointed out, there are two issues that I'm concerned about. We bought a boat 2 years ago, and like an earlier speaker, the boat was $15,000. The slip was $40,000. The boat was a bit of a fixer-upper, but it was all we could afford because we knew we were facing $15,000 in transfer fees. And this idea that not only is there a significant investment put forward, but that you do need, and I did learn, as an earlier speaker said, about this title trust, that you do want to make a return on your investment as a public holding too, but the percent does seem exorbitant, and it almost seems like it's just pushing it to what the market will bear because you can. And it does feel painful to those of us who really had to scrimp to try to get the slip in the boat, to have a boat in Santa Barbara and live in Santa Barbara. The second issue that has been raised already is this idea of a tax on a tax. So the taxation on an asset that we can never realize seems ludicrous to me. We can never realize the value of the transfer tax. That value goes to the harbor, the commission, and being taxed on that, the value that we cannot ever realize, seems strange. It's like paying taxes on top of, if I were making an investment, being taxed on the brokerage fees that I paid to make that investment as well. So I will turn over to the next speaker, but I would really appreciate if someone said an assessment of how to, how we make this a fairer system, and especially the tax issue and the taxation on tax is a bit of an issue on the transfer tax. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
Okay, so we have a speaker that lowered their hand. So the next speaker now is Dennis Bonnick. And then after that, we'll go back to John Brerer and Scott Weiner to see if they are available. Dennis Bonnick, I'm going to unmute you. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. It appears that he's self-muted.
Thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. I appreciate that very much. I've been a slip holder in Marina 4. I bought my first slip and boat, I think in the middle of 2005-ish. There's a 35-foot slip and boat. I enjoyed that for about 6 or 7 years, sold it. I didn't make any money on that. I didn't buy it with the intent of making money on it. I did it because I wanted to enjoy the water like everybody else. Then in 2014, I bought a 51-foot slip in Marina 4. And I think in the last 6.5 years or so, I don't think the value of my slip has changed much. I think the expenses have gone up. As a slip holder, I think there's a couple of things we would like to know from the commission to kind of clarify where you guys are going. I'd love to see a chart of the revenues for the harbor for the last 10 years. And I think all the slip holders would like that. And I think we'd like to see the expense growth numbers on a chart for 10 years. And that would help us understand what you guys are looking at and some of your motivation. Two things that the Tideland Trust looks like they have as their priorities, rightfully so. Number one, public access to, an asset the public trust owns. I haven't heard anything that tonight discussed from any party, any of the speakers, any of the commissioners, chairperson, anybody there that addresses that and improves the public access. None. I think you guys ought to possibly go looking at somehow expanding the asset that we all enjoy. The governor of California says there's a shortage of housing in the state. There's a shortage of housing in the county of Santa Barbara and the city. And obviously there's recreational shortage here. So maybe we can take a peek at somehow expanding our lovely harbor. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Bonnick.
Okay, the next speaker that we have is Scott Weiner. Scott Weiner, we've gone through a couple times. I'm not sure if you're available, but I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Yeah, I'm here. First of all, thank you for your patience because I know holding virtual meetings can be clunky at best. And thank you for tossing me back in the lineup. The other speakers hit on my original comment about the average slip holder making sacrifices to have a boat in the harbor. And a vast majority of us do not have extreme wealth. So thank you for tackling this problem. It is not easy. It is a vexing challenge. I also want to make a quick comment about the purpose of the harbor, and that's to have an active boating community. So my off-the-cuff recommendation after reading the Waterfront Director's slide about potential changes and impacts is to reduce the slip fee. And I'm not being crazy here, but it's a two-part process. We have so many boats in the harbor that are not navigable. These are boats that look like they can sink at any moment. If you enforce the navigability rule, this will likely open up about 20% of the harbor slips. This will now increase the supply and likely drive down the value of the slips a little bit. And now we have a shared burden. The slip value will go down a little bit, but there'll be a whole lot more transfers taking place. And with more transfers taking place, there's more transfer fees. Now, what you might say is that, okay, that will work just for 1 year because those boats that are about to sink, they get transferred. Now we're back to where we were. I guarantee you that a new boat owner, after he or she realizes what it takes to maintain a boat, will likely want to transfer their slip sooner than later because they can't maintain their boat. So I guess what I'm saying is you get rid of the boats that are about to sink, you increase the supply, it pushes down the price of the slip. Now, once you push down the price of the slip, there's more transfers, and now you can lower the transfer fees because the transfer fees are what's stopping younger families from getting into the harbor because they can't afford the slip and the transfer fee. I'll write this up in an email and send it to all of you. Thank you so much for your time and for tackling this. Have a good one.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, so our next speaker is John Brayer. Then we have William Nash and Terry Briggs. John Brayer, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. It appears you're self-muted at the moment. John Brayer. John Brayer. Okay, we'll come back to him. We're going to move on to William Nash. William, you're going to have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Good evening, honorable members of the Santa Barbara Harbor Commissioner. Thank you for hearing our appeal to you. We are asking for meaningful change now from you. I think there's been a lot of issues hit this afternoon, and 2 minutes is definitely not enough time to cover them, but I'm going to try my best and get moving here. So people buy these slips for family time. I've never met a slip profiteer in 32 years of being in that marina. During the time I've been there, I've seen the slip transfer fee go from $50 to an exorbitant gouge of $525 a foot. It is beyond unreasonable. The slip transfer fee is a massive hit to slip holders or buyers. Now, one thing that's interesting with respect to Director Wiltshire's discussion this afternoon is, he took issue with generational passing on of slips, but apparently that's okay if the slip transfer fee is paid. Next point, 2001 grand jury report called the system an embarrassment for the city of Santa Barbara. It's not quite as it was articulated to you. With respect to the county, the slip transfer fee is used as the third component to calculate taxable possessory interest. It's not okay. The extremely high nature of the slip transfer fee is an abuse of power. Lots and lots of people are upset in this marina. We've received hundreds of emails from folks. Some of them were not fit to send to you. Most folks in the marina are working class or retirees. It's not all very wealthy people. Like I said, I've never met a slip profiteer. We're asking for change. We're asking for a reduction.
Thanks, Mr. Knapp.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to Terry Briggs and then Leonard Marcus. Terry Briggs, I'm going to unmute you and then you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. It appears that you're self-muted at the moment.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear
go
me?
ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
So I thought the presentation by Mike was very well done, and my letter, had I heard that presentation before, what I'm going to read to you, I might not have written it the way I did, but I still believe it to that point. So I'm just going to read what I wrote, and it's pretty, I don't know, it's a little, shows how upset I am. The exorbitant slip transfer fee and ability to continue raising it is quite unreasonable for all of your current slip holders who for years, with harbor staff support as to how to officially do this, have bought and sold the rights to lease a slip. The most recent 100% transfer fee increase to $500 a foot can be considered in essence thievery. Clearly, the intention with this type of price gouging is to make money for the harbor without any care or concern for the people who have paid money for slips. Many people have saved and worked to buy slips in order to have their boats in Santa Barbara Harbor. Most of them figured they would recoup this payment if and when they decided to sell their boat and slip rights to another owner. The fact that some of these people who paid for slip will not only pay property tax for the slip, but will also pay an additional yearly tax for the transfer fee they paid to the city is more price gouging and unreasonable. So all the legalese about the water department and the permit transfer fee and attempt to counterbalance the monetary value. Well, the taxing and double taxing, the increase of the fee to $500 is not really addressing the problems with slip transfers. The harbor has known for years what is happening and loved getting their fees. This will not make the slips cheaper for people so they can now afford slips. Instead, it makes the cost of these slips go to the harbor rather than back to the people who originally paid for them. The slip transfer process, which...
Thanks, Terry.
Okay, so the last two speakers that I have showing with their hand raised is Leonard Marcus and then Christopher Vaz again. Leonard Marcus, I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin. It appears you're self-muted at the moment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I've had a slip in the harbor for 50 years. I've watched Lots of these fees come. I initially had a boat, little sailboat, Marina 3, that I paid $19.95 a month in slip fees. I was going to City College. So we're up to $300 and some dollars. I think the real issue here, I heard someone address it, is we need more slips. So I'm happy with going along with your increased fees, as long as you're going to start building some slips so the people of Santa Barbara have a place to put a boat. But the reason that slips are so expensive is because we're not building slips. And when you do build slips, you give them to people who are slip profiteers. I know a number of people who the last slips that you put in Marina 1 were given to people who didn't have boats for those slips and who sold them for a lot of money. So this is inappropriate. We need slips. That is what the harbor is all about. The Harbor Commission should be working for a whole new marina. Let's get rid of Stearns Wharf and put another breakwater on the other side. We wouldn't have to worry about Southeast as much. And we could have another 1,000 slips for people. And then maybe this problem would go away. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Leonard.
Okay, so we have Christopher Voss, and then there are 2 other people who have raised their hand. We have Craig Woodman and Scott Gordon. Christopher Voss, you're first. I'm going to unmute you, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Self-muted. Stedman, Chair Stedman, Commissioners, Chris Voss. Thanks for this opportunity to speak. I appreciate your challenge in trying to figure out how to address this issue. The transfer fees, we believe, are too high for the commercial fishing community and for the community at large. They, as Mike Wilshire pointed out, they are really a high percentage for the small slips. And I believe that the best solution would be to, at this point, lower the transfer fees for some of the smaller slips and potentially increase the transfer fees for the larger slips. And that would be, I believe, more in line with an appropriate percentage ratio in relationship to the actual fee, in relationship to the value. The notion that you make an investment in a slip and then are subject to a tax that it clearly compiles the transfer fee on top of a difficult calculation that is generated to create a value for the slip transfer. And then so the point is the county tax seems to be very unjust. So the conclusion is that we oppose the nature of the calculation of the county tax, as well as how incredibly high the slip transfer fees are currently. So I hope that we can figure some sort of reasonable solution that doesn't deprive the harbor of the needed resources.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, the final 2 speakers that I show with their hand raised are Craig Woodman and Scott Gordon. If anyone else would like to make a public comment that hasn't, please raise your hand and I will call on you after them. Craig Woodman, you're next. I'm going to unmute you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. I agree with many of the speakers who say owners of smaller slips are of modest means and thrilled to be able to be in Santa Barbara's lovely harbor. But from one of the slides, it is clear that the proportion of the slip value that is charged for the transfer fee is really exorbitant compared to somebody who can pay $1 million for a really large slip and pay 6 to 8%. As an example, from one of the slides, 400 feet for a 28-foot slip, $400 per foot for a 28-foot slip like I own. The 400 feet would result in a 40% fee when I try to sell that slip. And that's really going to be hard for a lot of people. And I can tell you that anybody that owned slip for 5 or 7 or 8 or 10 years can tell you slip values have not increased. They're not a moneymaker. For me, they're not an investment. I paid $35,000 for mine, and last year yacht brokers thought I could maybe get $28,000, $29,000, $30,000 for it. So the current system is unreasonable and not equitable between the smaller slip owner transfer fees and the larger slip owner transfer fees. Thank you for the opportunity, and I recommend further analysis be strongly considered. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay, our last speaker is Scott Gordon. Scott Gordon, I'm going to unmute you. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Thank you very much for the time. I had some prepared remarks, but I've sort of abandoned those based on what I've heard tonight. I would like to say, I don't know where Commissioner Nelson stands on the big picture, but I want to thank him for a comment he made very early. He said, called the slip holders clients. I've never ever felt in 30 years like a client of the harbor. I felt threatened as an abuser and a profiteer. All this talk about slip profiteering, and I just haven't seen it. I guarantee you, I can produce records upon records where people have lost money on slips and lost money on boats, and they're here to be boaters. I'm going to make a shout out for liveaboards. We haven't heard from liveaboards. I'm a liveaboard in the harbor, and the harbor policy welcomes me as a liveaboard and says, not only can I be a liveaboard, it has to be my primary residence. So clearly with my primary residence, I've invested some funds that I expect to get back one day. And I would like to see the respect as if we were clients of the harbor again and not viewed as abusers and profiteers. And I'll echo this whole idea of profiteering was this ridiculous thing that happened with the Marina One expansion where, you know, anybody that showed up on the special list got granted a slip, and clearly everyone knew what was going to happen. And, you know, that's why they added the 5-year baggage transfer fee to those slips, knowing what was going to happen. So I would just be careful. You've got a, you know, $50 to $70 million hornet's nest down here with private investment. And, you know, it doesn't take an accounting degree to figure that out. And so I want to thank you for the respect to call us clients. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Scott.
We do have 2 additional people that raised their hand. We have, excuse me, Robert Vader, and then John Brayer raised his hand again, so we'll call on him last. Robert Vader, it's your turn. I'm going to unmute you, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Hi there. First off, a boat is not an investment. It's basically a hole in the water, and we all pour a lot of money into that hole annually and over the lifetime of owning the boat. I own a 50-foot slip, owned it since 1997, and I've had a lot of friends that are including myself, that are really not that meager, that are meager of means, that can't really afford to pass on a lot of this fee. So I do feel that the fee is exorbitantly too high. I think that you're seeing a lot of action, like on number 9, page 9, it showed how, you know, much the fees were. The 50-foot and the 60-foot are about the same as they've been for over 10 years. And so they're really not going up much, although the transfer fee has gone up exorbitantly. So I'd like you to keep the transfer fee at a minimum. There's not a lot of people out there that are high rollers. It's a lot of common people that don't have, great means, and it will hurt them in the end. So I do appreciate that you consider that all slip holders have an investment in their boat and need a recoup of that investment. You'll never be whole because the boat just doesn't allow that. But to the degree that we can, we'd like you to keep the transfer fee minimized, and the taxes on a large boat far out exceed that transfer fee over time also, especially on those large boats. So that's another thing to consider. It's not going away. It's a tax on a public trust. So it is very high for newer purchasers into the harbor. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert.
It appears that our last speaker has lowered their hand. So at this time, I show no other speakers are indicating that they wish to make a comment. I can give it a couple moments in case someone else wants to raise their hand if you'd like.
Yeah, maybe a minute. So John Brer didn't raise his hand again.
He had it raised and then lowered it. So he just raised his hand again. Okay. So
Go.
John Brer, it's your turn. I'm going to unmute you. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and you may begin. John Brer? Okay, I'm not sure. I think he has lowered his hand again. So it appears that we've gone through all of our public speakers for this item.
Very well. Good job, Angela. So commissioners, I guess it's time for a little bit of deliberation on our part. Anybody want to, yes, Bill.
Thank you all. I wanted to thank everybody who took the time and effort to comment. I think many of us are open-minded, and if there's ways to make the system better, we're for it. But having been through this a couple times, there's a couple things I wanted to touch on that I heard a number of times. I heard the term slip owner multiple times. I think Mike showed in one of the very first slides, and I've heard this from staff working in the past, that these slips are not sold. They are not owned by the public. They're owned by the city and the waterfront, and they're leased. I think that might be the term. I think there is a school of thought that really what you're doing is you're leasing a parking space. So that's just one point I wanted to make. I think many of us believe that the slips are for boating. They're not necessarily for investment. That said, I totally respect the fact that numerous people in the harbor have put a lot of money into this and are looking at it, not as a profit center, but as to recoup. So I respect that. But slips are for boating. And then I guess one other thing I heard that I was a little surprised at is that somebody wanted to see the revenue and expenses for the harbor. And as I believe it, we see them quite often, and I believe they're on the website and they're public. So that's not hidden information, that's available. So those are just a couple points. I've been through this discussion 3 or 4 times over the years, and I just wanted to point those things out. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Any other comments? By the way, kudos to Mike Nelson for using the term clients. Good job, Mike.
Thank you.
Welcome.
John, I have a couple of comments.
Yes, Commissioner Sly.
it's impressive that people were that many people were waiting in line to have their get their thoughts out, and I really appreciate that. And I know this has been looked at many times over the years, but things do change, and the breadth of concern and frustration, I think, indicates that we should take another look at some of these things. The county tax is. I understand the frustration there. I paid tax on an airplane hangar for many years, and which also gets taxed, and you kind of wonder, gosh, this isn't even my space here. Why do I have to pay tax on it? But you know, that's beyond our control, and apparently has been well wrung out, and is something that's not going to go away, and something that we can't address. But a couple of things that it seems that we could address are discussing the thing that the transfer tax goes up every year, and yet the value of the slip often stays flat or even goes down, which kind of squeezes, you know, what people paid to get in, and that there's a finite cap on the total amount of dollars that are going to get spent for a slip. So it seems like that's something we could look at again. And also the family transfer issues. It seems like we could look at again. And none of these are easy to solve. And I know they've been looked at a lot of times, but just to respect people's concerns, I think it would be worth us taking a look at some of these things. And the wait list issue, I think, is probably can't happen because it would people who paid for a slip with the anticipation that someday they would get their money back, hopefully at the end of their tenure, if they had to just turn it back in and it went to somebody on a wait list, then they obviously lost the whole amount of that money. So I wouldn't expect that to be necessarily a topic of discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lang. Any other comments?
John, I have a couple of comments. It seems like there are two issues, and I think they're pretty obvious. One is the slip transfer fee and the increase in the slip transfer fee. And then the second is the tax, the county tax, adding the slip transfer fee to the value that they pay. And, you know, the county tax issue is something out of our purview. It's not really the purview of the Harbor Commission to look at that. And I don't mean that to pass the buck, because I did hear what that one person said, that, you know, if we just say it's not our job, that isn't fair either. And so I think, you know, Mike's done a good job of trying to address that and try and facilitate communication before it. But nothing that we can do is going to change the minds of the county tax authority. So it really gets back to the slip transfer fee. And I had a couple of ideas on that. And some of them were articulated earlier, so I'm just regurgitating these. But one of them is the family inheritance, the inheritance issue. And something that we might look at is, how do we do that? Is there a way that we can add children when they become adults onto that at a reduced fee? Or do we do something when the actual inheritance occurs at the time of the transfer in the estate? Is there something that family members may be able to pay a reduced fee there? And then on the fee itself, you know, maybe looking at some way of coming up with a percentage, a fixed percentage of the fee on what they pay for the permit. I don't want to say the slip, because that gets back into ownership, but the permit, the slip permit. And since the county is somehow getting a hold of that value, there's some value being reported somehow, and so we probably might piggyback onto that. But, you know, these are big issues, as was pointed out. And what I might suggest is that we form an ad hoc subcommittee on the Harbor Commission to look into this with staff and kick around some staff and the public to look into this and try and wrestle this. Because it's a big issue. I don't think we're going to solve it here tonight. I think we've heard a lot of very good input, and I thank all of the people for their input. But I think, you know, with their help and the Harbor Commission and the staff, maybe there is a way we can come up with some better ideas. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Thanks, Jim. Betsy?
Yeah, hi. I would, Jim took the words exactly right out of my mouth. I think there should be an ad hoc committee established. And just as there's a parking committee, though that's a standing committee, and to discuss this. And I should say we've had a number of mentions of this transfer fee over the years, but very few times have people come and spoken. And I really appreciate all the people that have come this evening and given their opinions. But I think it's way beyond the possibility of what we can decide tonight, and it would be great to have an ad hoc committee. That's what I have to say.
Thank you.
I just want to make one other comment, and I think Bill and Betsy will probably echo this as well. I think we've heard more public comment tonight than we have heard combined in the total 10 years I've been on the commission. So I thank everybody for their comments, and it was great to have the public come out. I wish we were live so we could see everybody, because it'd really be nice to fill that room. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Mr. Chair, I completely agree with the establishment of an ad hoc committee. When you look at Wiltshire's analysis and chronology, there's not really been a serious look at a new way of doing business for 30 years. And the report that the council member Friedman gave to a couple of folks that had called me basically talked about looking at other marinas and harbors in both south and north of our facility to see how they deal with this issue. So I really think a fresh look is long overdue and would support any motion to establish an ad hoc committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I too would like to thank not only those people who managed to get on and speak and present their perspective and views to us tonight, but also there are likely many other people who are actually listening into this. And it's an important topic. I also would like to kind of point out the basic issue here. That is that our slip fees, the lease fees are very low. And that's what allows the value to accrue to holding a slip, because they are so low. There would be a point if we were to charge market value for those slips on a monthly basis, where we would have a certain fraction of slips open all the time. And indeed, those slips would not have accrued this excess value on top of it that people are willing to finance and pay interest on, just as perhaps they would ordinarily have paid additional in their slip fee. They're paying the cost to finance the money or the foregone use of that money. So this is a complicated issue, and I agree we should take a closer look and also give the public more of a chance to be able to provide further input. Thank you.
Thanks, Merritt. Attorney Connect.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a couple of points. One of them having to do specifically with the inheritance issue that you were talking around a little bit, and that's just to just say that that's a really tricky and important issue, and the reason why is because as you mentioned earlier, slip permits, they're not leases, they're licensed, they're month-to-month license agreements that are revocable by the waterfront. They're not inheritable. We have provided in the municipal code some provisions that allow spouses to not even really inherit them, but to become co-slip permittees because of community property interests. But we specifically have provided explicit provisions in the municipal code to avoid inheritance issues, because once you get into an inheritance provision, then that makes slips last indefinitely. So that slip could go through families for generations. That would be a clear violation of the public trust doctrine, clear violation of the Santa Barbara Charter. It would, cause a myriad of problems. The one thing you could perhaps adjust would be the transfer fee, the slip transfer fee for transfers within a family. I think you could adjust that, and that would be probably an appropriate topic for this ad hoc subcommittee that you're talking about potentially forming. And then my second recommendation would be that if you are going to consider forming a subcommittee on, the broader topic of slip transfer fees or even slip assignments, that you give direction to staff. Your motion would be to give direction to staff to come back at the next Harbor Commission meeting with a recommendation to form this subcommittee, to recommend who would be members of this subcommittee, and to create some parameters around that, because that, is not really specifically what's on your agenda tonight. So you'd want to direct staff to come back at your next agenda with a recommendation to form that subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you for that advice, Sarah.
Sure.
We appreciate that.
Sure.
I think every commissioner's given input on this, and I'm really quite taken with everybody's comments. Many of you have much more experience with the harbor than I do, but I was impressed with the 20 public commenters we had this evening. Very valuable input. Given Sarah's last comment, does anybody want to make a motion to bring this discussion to a conclusion? Yes, Jim?
Yeah, so, as the attorney pointed out, this is nuanced, and so I don't know that we're going to solve it. So I would suggest that she recommended that we direct staff to come back at the next meeting with some parameters on setting up an ad hoc subcommittee that would work in conjunction with our clients, the harbor stakeholders, and in working with staff and the city attorneys and the other city staff that might have an input into this, to take a hard look at this. It has been looked at many times over the last 30 years. And I think there have been a lot of ideas that came out. It wasn't, I don't think Mike's presentation was all encompassing, but there have been a lot of presentations put forward in the past. We can delve into that a little bit more. We can look at some of these other issues and see what we can do to make this better. Maybe we freeze the slip transfer fees for a number of years. Maybe we take a look at it in the next budget about maybe there are ways we can address various levels of it based on what we know as to be the value of these slips currently. And just, there are a lot of areas like that I think we could look at. I think we could look at, maybe the reduced fee for transfer within a family. We could look at maybe freezing the slip transfer fees the next budget year. Maybe we could look at adjusting them up or down based on that percentage of perceived value of the permits as they stand today. I think these are some of the areas that the committee could start with to take a look at it and just go from there. So that would be my motion, that we ask staff to come back with some recommendations on an ad hoc subcommittee at the next meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, very well. Angela, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, of course, Chair Stedman. Okay, so Commissioner McCray,
Approve.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Sly,
Aye.
Commissioner Sloan,
Yes.
Commissioner Spicer,
Approve.
Commissioner Kramer,
Yes.
Chair Stedman.
Yes.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Excellent. That's the longest agenda item I've seen in my tenure on this commission. So again, well done by everybody. So we'll move on to the next item, which is staff communications and commission communications. Are there any communications now that any of you commissioners would like to make?
Don't we have the committee assignment? Oh, that's next. I'm sorry.
Jim, it appears that's afterwards.
I apologize.
Yeah, I don't know how it got ordered that way, Jim, but.
I think that, I know that Carl isn't here and he's retiring, but I'd just like to, publicly acknowledge all that he's done for us over the years. And, he's done a great job on the Marina One rebuild, and he's maintained all of our facilities and brought them up to a level that I think we can all be proud of. And I'd just like to, thank Carl for all of his hard work over all these years. So that would be what I'd like to say.
I agree with you, Jim. Anyone else? Any of the other commissioners?
You're here.
You're here. Good luck to Carl. Director Wiltshire, staff communications.
Yeah, Chair Stedman, commissioners. Well, I'd like to echo thanks for the great discussion on the last item and the clear direction. That's definitely something we can do. And then thank you, Angela, right on time. As we touched on at the start of the meeting, the legend Carl Treiberg is moving on to new things. So he announced his retirement a few weeks ago, so fairly fast for us, but I also wanted to personally thank Carl for all the information he shared with me, at least getting started. I mean, I've been in 6 months now, and Carl was a wealth of knowledge getting me up to speed. So Carl's not available tonight, and he made it clear he's not one for fanfare. So I get that in his personality, but although he's not here, if you see him out sailing in the channel or paddleboarding out at Ledbetter, give him a wave and say a hello. So yeah, we'll miss Carl, but as I mentioned to Commissioner Kramer, we'll be looking to fill his big shoes soon. We'll be recruiting fairly soon, and that process will take anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. So we can provide you an update on that at the next meeting. And then one other point, I just wanted to bring it to the commission's attention that we'll be taking an item to council on August 4th. And so per direction of the Harbor Commission, we'll be taking an update on the commercial fishing subcommittee to council. So it'll be very similar to the presentation that we gave last Harbor Commission meeting, but that will be to council with kind of the clear ask for a little input on council direction as to how the city and the waterfront should be involved going forward with the commercial fishing needs and looking for a piece of property. So that'll be in front of council on August 4th. I'll be giving a roughly 20 or 30 minute presentation similar to what you saw. So you're welcome to participate or watch in any way, but I just wanted you to know that was going on. And that's all I had, Chair Stedman.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike, and great presentation tonight. Very thorough. I got an education, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
So moving on to Harbor Commission matters now. Item number 5. Angela, can you read that item just so we refresh these 3 quick items, and then we'll look at the material that we have.
Chair Stedman. Item number 5, election of chairperson and vice chairperson and commission committee assignments. Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, nominate and elect the Harbor Commission chairperson for fiscal year 2021 per the City Charter Section 804 and the Board of Harbor Commission rules adopted September 16, 2010. Recommendation B, nominate and elect the Harbor Commission vice chair for fiscal year 2021 per the City Charter Section 804 and the Board of Harbor Commission rules adopted September 16, 2010. And recommendation C, review and update as necessary memberships on the various Harbor Commission committees.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And as my last official act as your chair, I'd like to nominate Lang Sly to be chair for the upcoming year. Do I have a second for that motion?
I would second that.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, Lang, it's unanimous. You're now the chair. So we'll get through this item and then you can adjourn our meeting. All right, congratulations. Next up, we have, yes, Commissioner Sloan.
Go ahead. I was going to make a nomination for vice chair, but go ahead.
After you.
I'd like to nominate Merritt McCray as vice chair.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, it's unanimous. Merritt McCray, you're now the new vice chairman for the upcoming year. Congratulations. Thank you for your service. So now we get to shuffle the deck a little bit as my last act on these committees. I know that Mike Nelson, you want to get on to the budget committee. So that's noted. And I'd like to take your place on the commercial fishing committee.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Okay. And now, do we need, Jim, Sloan, do we need
Wait a
to
minute,
make
Sammy.
room for Mike on that committee? Or do one of you need to move out?
I don't know the rules on that. Maybe somebody could fill it.
We can't have more than 3.
Okay.
Well,
So,
I would like to remove myself from that committee. Can I do that?
from which committee?
Can I step down from the commercial fishing committee?
Yes, yes, of course. And I'd like to step in your place. What we're trying to figure out is how we can fit you onto the budget committee. That was your desire.
That's my preference.
But we're limited to 3 on there. And we have Commissioners Kramer, Sly, and Sloan. Maybe Lang will make room for you since he's going to have to take on some extra duties now as chair. I don't know.
I'd like to point out one thing. I was never on the parking committee, so that's an error there. And I would.
I believe I was in that spot.
Okay. Much better choice. And then I, like Commissioner Nelson, I'd like to step down from commercial fishing if possible, if someone else would like to move on to that committee.
Okay.
Sure, I'm interested.
Great. So
And I think there's on the sea level rise, Betsy and I have been on that committee. So I think this slide needs some updating there as well.
Yeah, this slide doesn't match what Angela sent out earlier.
No, it does not. It does not. I'm looking at what was sent out earlier and it doesn't match the slide.
Yeah, that seems to be the more accurate list. So.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
All right, so let's just take the budget committee. We'll go in order here. So currently it's Kramer, Sly, and Sloan. Are we going to leave it that way?
John, I'd like to stay on that committee if I can. But if we can't find a good place for Michael that he wants to be, I'll reconsider that.
Okay. All right, so we'll hold that for a moment then. Chartering and business activity permits, we have Betsy, Merritt, and Bill.
I'll get off that.
Okay. Angela, I hope you're taking notes on all this. Commercial fishing, we now have Lang and Jim Sloan and myself.
No, I stepped down from that.
Okay, so you stepped down, so we have 2 people on that committee.
Right,
So
Betsy expressed an interest.
All right, so that committee's full. Parking, Betsy, Merritt, and Lang are on that committee.
I'll get off that too if anyone wants it.
Okay.
I'll take that if there's a spot.
Sounds like there is.
I was not aware that, let's see, am I on that? I'm trying to read this. Yeah, I was not aware. I've never been to a meeting of that. I was not aware that I was on.
It hasn't met in quite some time.
Yeah.
I think Merritt was on it, Lang.
I was on it, but if somebody else wants to get on and wants a spot, I'm perfectly happy to come off of it.
Okay. Depending on your notes, Angela, Well, actually, Lang's depending on your notes, so.
Okay. So right now, what I have is I have John Stedman filling in for Michael Nelson on the commercial fishing and Betsy Kramer filling in for Jim Sloan. And then I had Betsy Kramer that wanted to come off of the sea level rise. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Chartering.
Chartering and business activity permits.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Chartering and, okay. I've got that now.
Okay. And then we have the RFP committee, which is Merritt, Jim, and Bill.
Well, it hasn't met, and as far as
Okay.
I know.
We haven't,
Been a while.
we haven't met in a while. But I mean, it is a standing committee because we do get RFPs every once in a while.
So I
And
would
we
like
have-
to get off of that committee, if I can, if somebody else would like it, if it's going to exist going forward.
I would be happy to relinquish my spot to you, Merritt.
I want to go the other direction. I would like to come off.
Merritt's already on it.
There's no
Wow.
rule that says we have to have 3. We just can't have more than 3.
Right.
I'm
Right.
comfortable going
So
on.
I think-
I'm comfortable going on the RFP committee. But it would be nice if the
Okay.
RFP committee was not just dealing with selection, but actually with the decision to do an RFP. I don't know. But
Well, the RFPs are for things like lease spots that are open and things like that.
Right.
I mean, we don't generate the RFP. The RFPs are generated by circumstance.
Well, I happen to be one of those folks that thinks that, you know, the RFP is how the Waterfront Department decides what it's going to do differently or the same with properties or businesses. So I find that very interesting. So I'm willing to get on there if it helps with the problem on the budget committee.
Okay. And then I guess the last committee is sea level rise adaptation. Is that limited to 2, Jim?
Well, it's actually, it's a citywide committee. It's not a harbor commission subcommittee.
Okay. I
And
see.
so
So,
each department is allowed one person and one alternate. And so.
Well, no, we made it under 2, Jim. We're not an alternate. Harbor Commission has two representatives. Planning Commission has 2 representatives, and
And I'm not on that committee. I don't know why my name's there.
Jim and I are, but.
I was going to make the point, we share the responsibility, so.
right. Yeah, this slide's definitely confusing. So Angela, can you read back the shuffled, the new committee assignments, please?
So right now we have Betsy Kramer coming off of the catering and business activity permit. And then we have
Chartering.
her coming, I'm sorry, what was that?
The chartering and business activity permits, not catering.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay, so we have you coming off of that one. And then for the commercial fishing, we have Michael Nelson and Jim Sloan coming off, being replaced by John Stedman and Betsy Kramer. For the parking, I heard a request for Betsy Kramer coming off and Spicer going in. And then for the request for proposal selection, we have Merritt McRae coming off and Michael Nelson going in. And then the sea level rise adoption plan was staying the same so far.
That sounds about right.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Lang, I'm going to hand it over to you, my fellow commissioner, with some congratulations again.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, commissioners, for entrusting me to chair your future meetings for the next year. And for sitting through this long meeting. Very productive, I think. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And I think probably we don't need to do a roll call vote. We could just say aye or nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. See you in September. We will not, as I understand it, Mr. Wilshire will not have an August meeting.
That's correct.
Sorry to drag you back in. Okay, September is the next meeting, I believe.
Thank you, commissioners.
Welcome.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Nice to see all of you.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.